Denver bounces back versus the Pistons, but they've got a showdown with the champs on Sunday morning. Plus, the Zeke Nnaji game and what to make of Jamal Murray looking like, well, Jamal Murray. All that and more on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On. It's your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day, being with us Monday through Friday, being an everydayer, as we like to say around here, and joining us and being part of our community. We do appreciate you guys listening as often as you do. My name is Matt Moore. I'm a senior NBA writer for the Action Network. I have a newsletter called The Denver Dig that talks about the Denver Nuggets specifically. I'll have a piece up about their defensive coverage in depth coming up real shortly on that site, probably on Sunday afternoon is when I'll have that up. Appreciate you guys being with us. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. On today's show, we're going to preview the big game on Sunday morning as it's at 11 a.m. Mountain Time versus the Boston Celtics on Sunday. We'll talk about whether or not Denver can beat Boston, about that matchup, about all the kind of permutations and what to expect, what are reasonable expectations for that game. But we'll spend 2 segments talking about the win over the Pistons because it was Pistons have been red hot. Obviously, the Nuggets end their winning streak after they knocked off the Boston Celtics. So it was a phenomenal performance to beat a team that's been so good and so good at home. It was a really impressive performance, I thought, by Denver that put together a lot of good components, especially on the offensive end. Defensively, I have a lot of things. So what I did to rewatch this game after I watched it the first time, I want to get a good rewatch on it. I went back and I watched all of the defensive possessions for Denver first, and then I watched the offensive. And I will admit that there's a little bit of part of me that is so used to their good offense that I'm just like, yeah. And Jokic cuts to an open shooter and he scores. Right. But like their process was really good on the offensive end. It will leave you walking away if you rewatch it with a real appreciation for not just Joker and the simple stuff that he does that sometimes can engender really good possessions and his dominance over certain matchups, but also Jamal Murray, who I thought was really phenomenal in this game. So Murray in particular, I think the thing I was most impressed about in this game is he got to kind of not run the show. Joker's always going to run the show. But Jamal got to really, I thought, kind of exert his will on this game a little bit more with how he plays. Like this is a game where he got to play his game, and I thought that netted some really good possessions. So Murray ends up with 31 points, 10 of 22 shooting, 5 of 9, 9 3-pointers again. That's notable. He's really taken a lot of those threes coming off of spot ups and step backs off of the pick and roll and DHO. 4 assists for him. I thought the 4 assists actually were really great assists. He does have 2 steals. He continues to rack up a career high in steals this season and 1 block. He was a plus 23 despite those minutes with the second unit. And this was a bad bench game. So that was honestly really good for Jamal. I thought there were actually possessions where Jamal was the one that created a lot of really great looks. He had an absolutely awesome pass to Christian Brown over a double team. High pick and roll. He gets into the lane. They send 2 at him, and he still manages to make a jump pass over the defense, reverse the ball to that weak side wing, and Christian knocks home a 3-pointer. I thought that was a really great possession and an example of like what Jamal Murray could have been if he hadn't played with Jokic. And what I mean by that is like he wouldn't have been as good a player because Jokic makes everybody better, but like Jamal never got to learn that kind of like basic stuff, the stuff that all these other guards got to learn in their careers about playing with a role big, because he had to play specifically with Jokic, which is a different type of guard. And he's adapted really well to that, and he won a championship. But for all the conversation about how much Joker makes Jamal, and he does, this is a really good example of like, as Jamal's career would have evolved, he still would have been very good in some capacities on his own. I thought he was really terrific in this one. His offensive process, I just thought was elite. Jamal wasn't forcing up tough shots and making them. That's sometimes how he has big nights. He was so patient, I thought, in pick and roll situations. Asar Thompson is one of the best defenders in the league, and he really couldn't do anything to challenge Jamal. Jamal was so good at keeping the ball in spots where they could not get a hand on it. And even when he forced the issue and got into the paint deep, he either kicked it out, or there were possessions where I honestly thought he probably got fouled and didn't get a call. So I thought Jamal was really terrific in this one. And I thought it was really worth appreciating how good Jamal was in this game. This was not like the best game of Jamal's season, but it was just a really good reminder where he can be extremely dominant. Joker had 23 points, 17 rebounds, and 15 assists, and was a plus 33. What do you want? Like, he shot 12 times. He was 6 of 12 from the field. He had 17 rebounds. The most impressive thing, I'll talk about Zeke in the second segment. The most impressive thing from Joker in this game was, so it's not impressive for him to have 23, 17, and 15 because that's Joker, right? The impressive thing for me was how much he did not let Stewart get under his skin. Now, I love beef stew and think he would make a great Nugget. I think Isaiah Stewart is the exact type of player that you want on your team. Like, the idea of these guys being physical and just like, they just foul. God, like, can we just appreciate physical defense sometimes? Like, sometimes, and not cry that everything's a foul? This would have been unheard of. I don't mean to be cranky old man on the mountain, but the way that sometimes I think fans want their team to be officiated drives me nuts, because I think the Pistons play a really great brand of basketball, and Denver outclassed them instead of needing to whine about it. And I thought the Joker did a really good job of not letting Stewart get under his skin. He just took advantage of him and neutralized him by scoring through him, around him. And then when Duran got on him, it was really in that third quarter, and especially where the Nuggets just absolutely annihilated the Pistons. I thought Joker was so much in control. Like, this game was a little bit in doubt, and then midway through the third quarter, Joker just goes on a sequence where it's score, assist, score, assist, score, assist, and that was it. And that third quarter was 39-24. That's your ball game. That was it. That was the last chance that the Pistons really had to keep contact. They did not have a response. To Malone's credit, I thought it was really smart to play the starters the entire third quarter here and put the game out of reach. Like, he played starters almost the entirety of that third quarter. The only players that got on the floor in that third quarter, Jamal only played 10 minutes, so he got a 2-minute rest. Russell Westbrook played 3 minutes. Julian Strawther played 2. That was it. The starters otherwise play the entirety. Porter played 11 minutes of the 12. Jokic played all 12 minutes. Brown played all 12 minutes. Zeke Nnaji played 10 minutes. So that unit played so well, they put the game out of reach, so you didn't have to worry about the fourth quarter. That was, I thought, really good coaching by Malone, where he took a risk, right? And like, Jokic winds up with 34 minutes, so you would have wound up with him still logging, if the game had been close, between 40 and 41. But because he pushed those buttons, I felt that put the game out of reach. Porter plays 38, Jamal plays 35. These are all reasonable, I thought, in this kind of spot. So I thought it was a really good job to maintain an understanding of where they had them and put the pedal down, as opposed to getting them a rest and anticipating a fourth quarter. So I thought it was a really good situation. Russell Westbrook was really bad last night. It was a bad Russ game. There's not really much to say about it. It's Russ gets to have bad games. Russ's games are always going to be very loud when they're bad, and not just because of his play style and the fact that he's going to miss jumpers and layups and turnovers. Those are all loud things, but also his name. And like, you're looking for those type of things, and Lakers fans are looking for those types of things. So this was a really bad bench game overall. Russell was 3 of 7. Strawther was 3 of 7. I thought his defense was, I wouldn't say particularly bad. It was predictably bad. And like, the worst that you think of, he played to that level. It wasn't worse than his normal defense. It was just like, yeah, he's a bad defender. DeAndre Jordan, I thought, was fine. I thought he was actually pretty good in this game. There were sequences where, last thing before I take a break here, I want to talk about this. Something interesting last night. The Nuggets started running DeAndre at the level of the screen last night, which they may have done this in previous games and I just missed it. I have not seen that a lot this season, and DeAndre did it a lot in this game. Almost to the point of like, was Denver testing out, can they get away with playing at level with DJ in those sets? Because DJ's been more mobile, he's been leaner, and he's played pretty well this season. Now, the problem is that second unit, like, their backline defense is even worse than the starters. So it was really abominable once they got past it. And DJ's not going to be good in those kind of sets. But I did think it was kind of interesting that they were at least trying that. And there were sequences where they got the right, they prevented the shots that they wanted to prevent, but the weak side rotations weren't there, and they were still able to create easy scores. So bad night for the bench, but the starters were good enough to not make it really notable. Up next, I'm going to talk about Zeke Nnaji and what this means for him. Plus, I'll ask the question: Can you, as Nuggets fans, depend and trust on Jamal Murray again? He'll say yes. We'll talk about it up next here on Locked On Nuggets. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or you want to get in on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature. It helps keep every moment of the game exciting. Whether you're backing your team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, you're never going to feel like you missed your chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us here on a Saturday. Sorry for no show on Friday. I was going to do a post-game show, and then my wife asked me to help my daughter go to sleep by laying in bed with her, and then I fell asleep. I just passed out. I was out. It was done. So coming to you on a Saturday. Appreciate you guys being with us. We'll talk about the Celtics game in the last segment. All right, let's talk about Zeke Nnaji. How about this? 8 points, 2 of 2 from the field, 2 threes, 2 assists, 2 rebounds, 3 blocks. I think 2 of them, maybe 3 were in that first quarter. 4 fouls, but a plus 27. The best. I'm sure Zeke's had better statistical games. I don't know if he's had a better game than this in terms of his impact on the game. Zeke was everywhere. He was making great closeouts. He was making great rotations. And I'll actually note this in particular. So I yell all the time about that low man help, right? If you're going to play at the level, you better have somebody that can make that rotation over. Zeke Nnaji, the Pistons tested him in that first quarter, and he made 3 absolutely terrific rotations. One of them the Pistons scored on because you're going to get scored on sometimes in those situations. If that guy rolls and they hit the underneath man or the cutter, and you're there and your hands are up and you're defending and you're in position, and the guy makes a tough contested layup over you from outside of the restricted area, you did your job. And so Zeke's process was absolutely terrific in this game. The closeouts, like closing out on a 3-point shooter and blocking the shot is awesome. Zeke played fly around defense in this game, and the Nuggets need more of that. Now, the counter to this is like, you can play fly around defense, and if they pump fake, you're toast. You're absolutely done. And there's a couple of possessions you'll notice where like the Pistons definitely did not think Zeke Nnaji could make that rotation. And the game plan was you can shoot this 3 because it's Denver, and Zeke was just able to close ground faster and sharper than the other Nuggets have been able to this season, including Aaron Gordon. And he caught him by being able to close out and really contest or block those shots. Now, if things evolve, that shifts a little bit, where the next move will be like, hey, Zeke Nnaji can make this rotation. Make sure that you pump fake and you can get past him, because like he's not making the type of rotations. Like I singled out in Asar Thompson that people strongly felt was a foul on the eventual shot. But my point was about the closeout. If you watch Denver, they're always late on closeouts and they're always off angle on closeouts. Zeke's angle on closeouts was really great in this game. To my knowledge, like untrained eye, like I thought that the closeouts were really terrific in this game. I do have some concerns about the fly around stuff, because I'm always a fan of like the absolute fly in the air, make a desperate attempt to deny that 3. To me, a pump fake sidestep 1 dribble 3, okay, is still a lower percentage shot than a catch and shoot one, because the numbers say it is. Like historically, the math says you make that shot less often than you do the other one, even though you're wide open. If you have to dribble, you're going to make the 3 less often than if you just spot up in most cases. There's a few players that are exceptions to that rule. So I always love those kind of closeouts. But if you drive off of those sequences, then the defense has to rotate on the weak side while you're trying to get back in the play, and that can result in those catch and shoot spot up 3s on the other side. So it's always a balancing act, but you can't fault Zeke for the effort here, because the Nuggets have needed way more of that. Like they've needed defensive efforts like what Zeke Nnaji brought to the table in this game. And I thought he was absolutely terrific. I thought that the way that he played in both transition, on ball, in man situations, he was absolutely terrific. This was one of the best defensive games that we've seen from a Denver Nugget this season. I wish that wasn't as depressing as it is, but it's accurate. And it wasn't like a not bad game. It was a legitimately great game defensively. Zeke was absolutely phenomenal. So I thought that he was really good here with the situation. Okay. I want to talk real quickly about Jamal Murray. Let's talk about Jamal and take a look at what we kind of think about with Jamal's short-term future. So we talked about on the positivity episode about how Jamal's like 21-6 again. That's the Jamal Murray, right? He racks up 31-4 in this one. And over the last 2 months, he has been a lot closer to playoff Murray and the Murray that you knew and loved and expected going into the back half of last season than the player that he was from middle of March last year through December, I think is probably fair to say. I think an interesting question is, can you trust him as a fan? Murray's answer would be, I won you a title. I've been great in the playoffs before. Murray's never had a bad playoffs. He was rough in the first series versus the Spurs, got his legs, and then was good versus the Blazers. And he was really great to close that series versus the Spurs. Then obviously the bubble happened, and he was the bubble Murray in there. And then he misses 2 years, comes back, they win the title. And then like last year, he was obviously really bad. Like, so he has been bad in the playoffs, but not until last year had he been bad. And so for him, it's like you have 3-1 great Murray performances to bad Murray performances in the playoffs. So you can absolutely trust him. I will tell you that watching him in this game, when I went back and did the rewatch, it wasn't just the control. He was so much more slippery. Jamal was able to get to easier stuff physically. Everything did not look like an absolute chore for him to create offense, which is impressive when you're facing an NBA defense, and in particular, Asar Thompson. So I've been really impressed by how Jamal looks right now. Now, it's March 1st. The NBA playoffs do not begin for another 45 days. So you have 5 more days of play to try and keep Jamal at this level of health, which I think is important. And that's got to be balanced by conditioning. You can't not play him. You can't play him too much. You got to try and keep him in a good rhythm and keep him from accumulating small injuries. And that's really hard in the NBA. But I will tell you that physically, this is night and day different from how Jamal looked even in March of last season. He's been really good. Robert Arte notes that then we have 2 years of not knowing because of injuries, and fair enough, not his fault. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, right? It's like you can't hold those 2 years against him. Like he had an ACL injury. Like it happened late. He wasn't able to come back the year after. I think he had a setback at some point, probably that wasn't reported. Like stuff happens. But I do think that Jamal, I think probably at least the signs right now are very positive, and that to me is a reason for optimism. I think that I have like my DEFCON concern, right? We start at 5, which is everything's fine. 1 is nuclear war. If my DEFCON concern for Jamal was like a 2 earlier this season, we're back to like a 4, maybe a 5. I wouldn't be surprised if Jamal has a great playoff run. Now, opponents matter a lot in there. He'll struggle versus Lou Dort. He'll struggle versus the Rockets, I think. He'll struggle versus... I don't know if the Lakers have a guy. The Wolves, right? Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He'll struggle against those guys. And there's a lot of matchups that are not Jamal favorable in the playoffs, but we have to see the board. We got to see it, you know. Maybe they get Memphis. I'm not worried in Memphis about him versus Jalen Wells, even though I think Jalen Wells is really good. There's a possibility that goes sideways, but I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about him versus the Clippers, even with Chris Dunn. Chris is phenomenal, but he's not that type. I don't think he's the type of defender that gives Jamal problems. So I think you have reason to kind of be optimistic about where Jamal is at going forward. Okay. The Nuggets have a huge game versus the Boston Celtics on Sunday. National TV game. Last 2 champs face off. How's this going to go? We'll talk about it and preview it here up next on Locked On Nuggets. Final segment with you here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making this part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us here on a Saturday. I just updated the sideboard on youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets because people were saying that it was an old show. I apologize. I just had not clicked the button. That was my bad. You should go to youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets though and join up and join the 9,174 guys. Guys, we are 826 away from 10,000. I just need 826 more. You can do it. We can do this. Tell a friend. Send the show to a friend and be like, hey, subscribe to this for me because I'm an everydayer and you should be too because all we have is each other in this crazy world. Do that for me. Let's talk about the Boston Celtics. Okay. The Nuggets play Boston on Sunday. And the Nuggets are coming off of a win. The Nuggets, as everyone has noted, have had real trouble beating teams that are over 500. They have not been good this season. They are 11-9 straight up versus teams with a 55% winning percentage or better, but 3-6 above 60% and 1-3 versus teams with a 70% or better win percentage. The Boston Celtics are at 70% going into this matchup. They have not been good in these matchups this season. It's an early game, which does not favor the road team. Western Conference teams going into this early spot when you're playing before 6 p.m. Eastern, you tend to lose, especially when you're a dog, you tend to lose about 70% of the time. So every trend-based thing says Denver's going to lose this game. Matchup is not good either. So that's the problem. Denver had Boston's number there for a little bit. They won 3 straight. They swept them last year. They beat them at home in 2023. They have played them close through the years, and a large part of that is because of the makeup of the team. They are 12th, I believe, in points in the paint per 100 possessions allowed, Boston is. So when you face the best team in the league in points in the paint, the Denver Nuggets, and with the best center in the league and the best player in the league who plays on the interior, that's a huge matchup in Denver's favor. And Joker, if he engages tomorrow, should be able to have a lot of success. The problem for this is that the way the Nuggets play specifically plays into how Boston plays. Here's what Boston does. Boston says, you can score very easily on us in pick and roll as the scorer. Jamal should be able to have a game in this game, even with Derek White and Drew Holiday potentially back. Drew's not had a great season, by the way. The Celtics actually are the second worst team in points allowed per possession against pick and roll. The reason is that Joe Mazzulla does the thing which everyone would do, which is like, you can take all the mid-range shots that you want. You're not getting to the rim, and you're especially not kicking to open three-point shooters. Denver is the literal opposite. Denver is surprisingly good defending the pick and roll. They are surprisingly good defending shooters in pick and roll situations. Jamal actually has some pretty good numbers. Christians are not good. They're pretty poor. The issue is that Denver overhelps to such a ridiculous I'm not even kidding you. You can go back and watch the Pistons game, and this is evident. Go back and watch any Nuggets game and watch the opponent shots, opponent possessions, and pick and roll. And here's what you're going to notice. The guys got it contained. The 2 guys guarding the pick and roll have it contained. But the other guys are so intent on helping and trying to prevent breakdowns because they don't trust each other that they overhelp, and that leads to open shots, and that leads to open threes. If you want the numbers, I pulled these because I'm working on a thing for Action Network. Here we go. Denver this season is 22-16 when the opponent makes more threes than they do. That's a really good number. That's really good. 22-16 is a good number. They have a good winning percentage when the opponent makes more threes, right? Because they're so good anyway. That drops to 14-13 when the opponent makes 2 or more threes than Denver does. 14-13, 1 game over 500. They're 9-8 though when the opponent makes 5 or more threes more than Denver does. They're still above 500 when Denver allows 5 more three-pointers than they make. 6 is the number. This is the number, is 6. When the Nuggets allow 6 more three-pointers made than they make, they're 5-7 straight up. They are 1-6 when the opponent makes 8 or more threes than Denver does. The Boston Celtics average 5 more than their opponent. Denver has to completely invert its strategy in this game or they're going to lose. Everything that I yell about with the math problem, Denver has largely not disproven. They've proven that it is not that simple, that they can lose games where they get killed at the 3-point line. Like you can, if you tell me that a team makes 4 more threes than you, I'm usually like, you lost. They had 12 more points. 4 more points if you want to count 2-pointers, right? Like that plus 12 in the 3-point range, it should be absolutely murder. Denver doesn't necessarily struggle in those spots. They still win more than they lose. They're okay. They are so good offensively with how they score that they can make up for it. That's how good you have to be. You have to have exactly Jokic. But Boston is such a different kind of type of deal. If you overhelp, they're going to give up all these threes to Derek White. They're going to give up all these threes to Peyton Pritchard. They're going to give up all these threes to Jaylen Brown. They're going to give up all these threes to Kristaps Porzingis. They're going to give up all these threes, and they're going to get absolutely cooked. Now, Jason Tatum's going to take he was incendiary versus the Cleveland Cavaliers the other night. That's an almost famous reference. He was absolutely incredible. He was so terrific in that game. But you'll live with that. Like, you should live with the ISO stuff, generally speaking. If AG is playing, AG is going to match up with Tatum. Tatum's going to cook him sometimes. He'll play him physical. You do the best you can. The pick and roll slips are a real problem because, again, that requires on weak side help and recovery. So if the Nuggets, let me kind of game plan this out for you. The Nuggets want to switch everything, right? If it's 1-4, they're going to if they put Porter into sequences, if Porter's guarding Drew Holiday is going to set those screens. Or they'll have Drew Holiday take the ball, and then they'll have Tatum slip. And you have to be able to recover and then make a decision on the other two. The best thing to do is not recover on the interior and try and do a chase down play on Jason Tatum and make him miss the layup. I am not kidding you. It's a better sequence. I firmly believe this after the research I've done. If you let Boston get up an uncontested 3, it does not matter whether they make it or not. You have lost the possession. You should think that you lost the possession if they take an uncontested 3. I don't care who it is. I don't care what the percentage is. I don't care how they're shooting in that game. Unless it is specifically the Memphis plan, which is you leave Drew Holiday open, it's a loss. That's a loss in that possession. So to me, that's like entirely kind of it. Robert Ardarte says Denver would have to treat tomorrow like a playoff game in order to have a chance. And we saw against the Lakers and other teams that take it seriously. Yeah. So I think the Eastern Conference thing is a lot different than the Western Conference thing. I would honestly go all out for this one. Like, I would game plan up a completely different strategy for this one. You have this whole day. I mean, they're hanging out today, off day, but they should come in with a completely different plan tomorrow. For whenever they do a meeting, probably tonight, they should come in with a different plan. A completely different defensive plan than they usually do, and just experiment. You're likely to lose anyway. You're on the road versus Boston off of 2 losses. Boston's been bad at home this season, but they are so good off of a loss. And this is off of 2. They are going to be pissed off in this game. But you can still get a win, but you're going to have to change your defensive strategy. You cannot go in with the same kind of defensive approach that you do every game, because this Boston team in particular just bends it too much. They average too many 3-point attempts. You will not be able to keep up. Even if your offense is cooking, you're not going to be able to keep up with them. They'll eventually catch up with you. And that to me is like the difference here. John Steichen has over-under on how many threes Denver fouls on. Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a question, right? Is like, but honestly, I'm going to tell you, like, I think that's still a plus EV. I'm not kidding. I still would rather, I know that they're all like 77% plus, 80% plus 3 or foul shooters. I still kind of want them to make them make it. Don't give them the shots it's more about not letting Boston play their game, because Boston's not comfortable when they don't get to play their game. Cleveland in the second half the other night. So Cleveland gave up 26 3-point attempts in the first half of the game. It was actually, I think, 26 after the first 3-pointer in the third quarter. And I was like, all right, they're cooked. If they're going to allow this many threes, they're done. Cleveland allowed 11 3-point attempts in the second half from Boston. They won the game. It's not a coincidence, guys. Like this is the entire thing that you have to be able to bring that kind of effort. Denver can get a win tomorrow if they just shoot the lights out. If they just have an absolutely incredible offensive performance and they shoot an insane percentage on pull-ups, if Murray is just liquid fire and Jokic is going, like they could still win this game. Like you can win this game in a number of ways. The base matchup is very tough unless you get an outlier like that. And even then, if you get an Inferno Murray game and a great Jokic game, you can still lose if Porter can't hit threes and is a negative, and if you allow Derek White to shoot spot-up threes. Mike Weinsberg says KP and Drew, I think, are still questionable. That's honestly in the Celtics' favor. Last 15 games, they have a negative net rating with Drew Holiday on the floor. KP has the lowest on-court net rating of any rotation player for Boston this season. Very quietly, that's a big one of the reasons why I am not 100% convinced. The matchup still very much favor Boston coming out of the East. The reason I have held out some hope of a dark horse with Boston is because of stuff like I think Drew Holiday is not. I think there's a slide with age, and I think KP is not having the same kind of year. And that I think kind of helps. Weisberg says expect a lot of Luke Cornett and pick and roll in some of those Zeke minutes. Yeah, so this is something that I kind of have singled out before. Again, you kind of gotta like if Luke Cornett beats you, cool. Like, hey, good for Luke Cornett for dunking the ball. Great job. But you have a better chance of winning a Luke Cornett game than you do a Derek White game or a Peyton Pritchard game or a Sam Hauser game or a Jaylen Brown game or if Drew Holiday makes like 5 threes, you're sunk. You're gonna lose. You know, I would dare Drew Holiday a little bit. So Rodarte says we had success when Malone put Jokic on Holiday and dared him. Same with Paul when he was with Golden State. A little bit. Yep. A little bit. I think the best strategy is to let Tatum cook as much as possible and try and make him beat you with ISOs. Tatum's still very good and can do it. I have a lot of confidence in the Nuggets offense, but it's also an early start. They just may be out of sync. This is a big game for MPJ, I think. I just think it's a big game for him. He needs to show that he's a weapon here. If he is not a contributor on either end, this is going to get ugly. It's going to get ugly very quickly. The bench is going to get killed. Just prepare yourself now. The bench is going to get eradicated. The Celtics have so many good players in their starting six that even without Drew Holiday and KP, they're able to stagger so many minutes that they're going to have multiple starters on the floor or starter caliber guys on the floor versus Denver's second unit. There's no solution here. Like they're just the beginning of the second and the beginning of the fourth are just going to be massacres. If Denver wins those minutes, it will be a massive upset and it'll be one of those like couldn't see that coming things. If they play him even, that's a huge win for Denver. You got something to go your way. And that's what you're going to need in this game. Like you need things to go your way in this game in order to beat Boston, but there's also a strategy you can implement that gives you a chance. All right. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. Tomorrow night, we'll be back to recap the Celtics game on No Jinx with Ryan Blackburn. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Enjoy the Celtics game on Sunday. We'll see you guys again next time here on Locked On Nuggets.